The policy inertia of the U.S. government is extremely strong and will not easily make a U-turn. On the first day after winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election, Trump had a phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. Zelensky said on social media that the conversation on November 6 was very pleasant, and the two agreed to maintain close dialogue and strengthen cooperation. 4 months ago, Zelensky and Trump had their first conversation since 2020, and the two also held a meeting in September at that time. In front of the Ukrainian president, Trump said that his relationship with Russian President Putin was good and his thought of ending the war as soon as possible had not changed. Previously, his most exaggerated statement was that he could end the Russia-Ukraine conflict within 24 hours. On November 6, when Trump delivered his victory speech, he said again, "I will not start a war. I will stop a war." Can the plan of the elected U.S. President Trump promote the relevant parties to reach a big deal? Both Russian and European figures have pointed out that Trump will find it difficult to quickly change the policy inertia of the U.S. government, and his influence on the current conflict situation is more likely to be long-term. In the short term, what is more worthy of attention is whether the current U.S. President Biden, who has less than 2 months left in his term, will take bolder measures for his historical status. According to U.S. government officials, Biden is ready to quickly release the last tranche of nearly $6 billion in U.S. security assistance to Ukraine before Trump's inauguration ceremony on November 6. Rubio, a Republican senator and a popular candidate for the position of Secretary of State in the new Trump administration, gave a TV speech. He said that the Ukrainians are brave and strong, but the war reality is not optimistic. "I think there must be some common sense here. We are funding a stalemate that causes losses of lives, and it will take Ukraine 100 years to rebuild everything they are facing." In August this year, the Ukrainian army launched a ground military operation in southern Kursk Oblast of Russia for the first time. At that time, the analysis believed that the Kiev command was trying to make ground military progress before the U.S. presidential election in order to gain a more active position in the political game. But in October, the battle in the Donetsk front became increasingly difficult. Rubio's speech shows that Trump's inner circle is still negative towards the battlefield efforts in this case. It is a high probability event to return to Trump's peace plan. But for a long time, the specific content of this plan has not been clear. Most of the early disclosures by the U.S. media mention contents such as ceding territory and recognizing the separation of Donbas and the independence of Crimea. According to new information from the Trump team, these conditions are no longer under consideration. Reuters disclosed that to senior advisors of Trump proposed a new plan in June this year. Both Russia and Ukraine freeze the current battlefront and start peace negotiations. If Ukraine does not comply, the U.S. will stop providing military aid to the Ukrainian army. If Russia does not comply, the U.S. will increase military aid to the Ukrainian army. Allegedly, Trump reacted positively to this plan. This is in line with his political needs. Whether the Ukraine issue can be resolved is not important. What is important is that the war can be ended shortly after his inauguration. The latest plan was just disclosed to the media by Trump team sources in October. It is said that this combines the proposal of the elected Vice President Vance. On the basis of freezing the battlefront, non-military autonomous regions will be established on both sides of the battlefront. In the future, these autonomous regions may still be incorporated into Ukraine. But the condition for this transaction is that Ukraine will not join NATO within a certain number of years. Trump seems to just want to sit with the Russian president and then redraw the boundary line like the Yalta Conference in the later period of World War II, said Thomas Germinger, the executive director of the Geneva Center for Security Policy and the former Secretary General of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. But the issues of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the solutions are very complex. And Ukraine needs to participate in the negotiation process of the solution. The Trump team believes that they have enough ability to pressure Ukraine. Trump not only won the presidential election, but also led the Republican Party to obtain a majority in the Senate and has a high probability of controlling the House of Representatives. McConnell, the leader of the establishment faction in the Republican Party who most supported aiding Ukraine, will retire from the Senate this month, promoting the passage of the $95 billion package aid plan for Ukraine, including aid to Ukraine in Congress, is the last legacy left by McConnell, exhausting his political capital. But it has been attacked and obstructed by all Trumpist lawmakers, including the elected Vice President Vance. Vance also sarcastically said, "No matter who the next Republican leader in the Senate is, he will not care about Ukraine as much as McConnell." Now, once Trump thinks that Zelensky does not respect the opinions of the U.S. side, no one can stop him from cutting off supplies to Ukraine. Trump's advisors emphasized that in this context, Trump's plan is not unacceptable. And the plan itself also saves face for both Russia and Ukraine. For Zelensky, freezing the battlefront does not mean ceding territory or giving up territorial claims for Ukraine in name. Nor does it mean a final agreement, of course. There is a big gap between Trump's plan and the current peace conditions of the Zelensky government. However, Ukrainian figures emphasize that the problem does not lie in whether Trump can pressure Zelensky, but whether the Russian side is interested in these proposals. The demilitarization of the two sides in the war zone, the possible return of the autonomous regions to Ukraine, and Ukraine's not permanently not joining NATO do not meet the conditions previously put forward by Putin. Moreover, the side with the advantage on the battlefield is often unwilling to quickly come to the negotiating table when Trump realizes that Putin is not in a hurry to make compromises. He will be very disappointed because there is simply no possibility of reaching a peaceful compromise at all, said Mir Zyachko, the chair of the Foreign Policy Committee of the Ukrainian Parliament. Therefore, the Ukrainian side is more looking forward to the second half of Trump's plan. Every version of the plan mentions that if the Russian side refuses Trump's mediation, the U.S. will increase military support for Ukraine. So, if Trump really promotes the peace process, will Russia refuse? At present, the Russian official has maintained a cautious attitude towards Trump's victory. Regarding Trump's peace proposal, Peskov, the press secretary of the Russian president, said on November 6 that Russia has noticed Trump's wish to end the war and will wait and see after January next year. Kurt Anovi, an academic director of the Russian International Affairs Council, has been involved in the second-track dialogue between the U.S. and Russia on the Ukraine issue. He pointed out that all good ideas are on the table at present, from controlling the escalation of the situation to the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, the safety of nuclear facilities, and up to the ceasefire negotiation. There are many solutions at different levels and stages that politicians can promote. And the key lies in the political will to promote U.S.-Russia negotiations. We are still communicating with US officials, discussing ideas, and trying to follow the development of the situation. After the U.S. general election, there may be a new wave of enthusiasm for the second-track contact between the U.S. and Russia. Kurt Anovi said before the election in this process, the personal relationship between Putin and Trump may be helpful for peace. The connection between the two is closer than expected by the outside world. Since Trump stepped down as president in 2021, he has had 7 unannounced phone calls with Putin. He also presented virus detectors to the Kremlin during the epidemic. The two last contacted each other this year. In addition, the American journalist Carlson, who went to Moscow to interview Putin in February this year, not only did not end his media career because of this, but further enhanced his status in Trump's small circle. After Trump's victory, Carlson had a chat-style interview with Musk. Musk also jokingly mentioned that Democrats think he has a good relationship with Putin. Analysts pointed out that this means that if Trump wants to send a message to Putin, his channels may be very diverse. However, Courtenovi emphasized that the policy inertia of the U.S. government is extremely strong and will not easily make a U-turn, which is the real obstacle faced by Trump's plan. Courtenovi believes that in a short period of time, Trump will find it difficult to change the systematic support of the U.S. military and diplomatic system for Ukraine. Therefore, only gradual policy adjustments are worthy of attention. Trump has already said that he regrets many personnel arrangements during his previous presidential term. At that time, many senior officials he appointed obstructed the implementation of the president's personal ideas. This time, Trump team officials told the media that they will try to prevent the new government from weakening Trump's authority. Currently, Senator Rubio, Senator Haggerty, and former ambassador to Germany Grenell are all regarded as strong candidates for the Secretary of State in the new government. They all have a good obedience record during Trump's previous presidential term. On the evening of November 6th, the defense ministers of Germany and France held an impromptu meeting in Paris to discuss the impact of the U.S. election on European defense. On the morning of the same day, German Chancellor Scholz and French President Macron had already talked on the phone to discuss the impact of Trump's victory on Europe. A spokesperson for the German government said that the two countries have pledged to cooperate more closely in the future. German Foreign Minister Baerbock bluntly said, "Europeans must now take on more responsibility for security policy." The anxiety spreading rapidly in Europe stems from a long-term obsession of Trump. America's allies should pay for security costs themselves instead of expecting the United States to provide assistance as an ally. If allies do not bear the cost, they should bear security responsibilities themselves. During Trump's first presidential term, NATO was on the verge of brain death, and promoting European strategic autonomy became a defense option that the EU had to consider on the eve of the election. A series of remarks by Trump showed that his obsession has not changed. Only, his recent remarks are more targeted at South Korea. In an interview with the media in October, he said, "If I were in the White House, South Korea would pay us $10 billion a year. At present, the cost paid by the South Korean government for the U.S. troops stationed in South Korea is $1.1 billion a year. South Korea is a money-making machine." Trump told reporters the core of an alliance relationship lies in obligations. And Trump doesn't like obligations. Robin Niblett, former special advisor to the Foreign Affairs Committee of the British House of Commons, pointed out, "Now, due to the gap in the military-industrial system, Europe cannot maintain military aid to Ukraine in the absence of the United States. But it is also unable to bear the high cost of U.S. aid to Ukraine according to quantitative data from the Kiel Institute for the World Economy. Since February 2022, the total value of military aid provided by the Biden administration to Ukraine has exceeded $40 billion. More than twice the sum of military aid from Germany and the United Kingdom, which rank second and third. More importantly, in several peace plans proposed by the aforementioned Trump team, Europe has never had a say. The only arrangement involving Europe is that in the plan proposed in October, European forces rather than NATO or UN forces will go to the non-military zone between Russia and Ukraine to maintain order. How will Europe persuade the Trump administration on the issue of military aid to Ukraine? And how can Europe ensure that the United States listens to the advice of its allies? Niblett introduced the transaction path that Europe may take first. The EU and the UK may adopt more diversified funding arrangements to share the cost of US aid to Ukraine. So we can say to Trump, "You don't have to pay so much." CNN also pointed out that about $29 billion of the expenses for Ukraine to buy US weapons comes from economic support from the EU and the UK. So the United States is the beneficiary. Second, European countries may be forced to buy more American oil and gas in accordance with the requirements mentioned by Trump in the election campaign. They may even maintain more consistent policies with the United States on security and economic issues in other regions in exchange for US concern for European security. Finally, fundamentally, the strategic autonomy genes of major countries such as France and Germany will sprout again. But this time, Europe may adopt the approach of building the Group of Seven to build a closer alliance with Western partners such as Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Perhaps one day the United States will join. If it doesn't join, at least we still have a group. Through these methods we will be able to get through a 4-year troublesome period. I believe the time will not exceed 4 years. After that, even if the next government is a Republican government, its leader should also realize the importance of allies. Niblett said, "The global influence that Trump wants to maintain, but cannot actually obtain is the return for the United States to fulfill its obligations to its allies."